Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage. We're take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're doing a Lies of P review, and I know it's been out since September of 23. It's a long time coming, but I had so much fun actually almost completely finishing the game. I'm on the last boss. But I've played everything else. I've done all of the side quests that I can. And yeah, I've had such a fun time. I just want to share my thoughts on this because if you're looking for something to play while you're waiting for something else to come out, this would probably be a fairly good game to play. Now, if you really hate Dark Souls like games or Elden Ring games, they're just not for you, that's okay. There's some other stuff out there. But like if you kind of like some of them or you enjoy the challenge in some games or you do like Dark Souls, man, this is a wonderful one to actually try. So, Liza P is over the story of Pinocchio, the fable, the legendary story. And they've tweaked a lot of stuff with the story too. So like they've done a really good job with the lore and the world building and creating this kind of alternative story of Pinocchio while generally following the characters, following kind of the the general story, of Pinocchio. And they've done a great job with that. So like you see Jiminy and you have Geppetto and you have Pinocchio and you have some of the other characters in there too. But like they've redesigned and tweaked things to make it more like a Dark Souls ish. And it very much reminds me too of Bloodborne. Out of all of the Dark Souls out there, very much reminds me of kind of the Bloodborne style because this takes place during a like Victorian era of society, which had been like, probably 18 to early 1900s, depending on where you live. This also takes place in France, and so there's a lot of there's some things there too in the game that are reminiscent of France and kind of also how people talk and a little bit of the accents there, at least in English. And yeah, like they've done a wonderful job. The game design itself is again very much like Dark Souls, very much like Elden Ring. Basically, you have multiple levels. Each level it gets progressively harder with enemies. Each enemy can be different, or there can be ambush points, or there's also like mini bosses, and then of course final bosses at the end of each level. The combat too is again fairly varied. There's different types of weapons that focus on basically strength, dexterity, or even like to a degree what we would call magic, though it's a little different in this game. And there won't be any spoilers for this either. I'm going to work on keeping that free. But something that's really neat about the combat is not only can you upgrade, of course, your equipment and your weapons, which more or less it's your weapons and a little bit of your equipment, is the main focus of combat, but you can also change the handles from like the blades. So if you like the particular characteristic of a blade, you can move it to a different handle, and you can literally craft and mix match your own weapon to what you actually want to focus on, and that's been really cool. The thing too is like, of course, as you move through the world, through the levels, you encounter more stuff. You have kind of like pendants or like the equivalent of rings to give you buffs and boosts to certain things. So yeah, the combat has a pretty good range of style, and is pretty fun. And there's a lot of different types of weapons too. You have your regular weapons that you can find out in the world, or you can buy them, and then you also have your boss weapons as well. And then too, also kind of like the layout for like rings or for like certain pendants, amulets they call them in this game, to give you certain buffs like, regenerate health, more health, max out stamina, that kind of thing. Or protect you from a certain ailment or disease, let's say. There's a bunch of those actually out there. And yeah, it's been a really fun game. There's also different outcomes in the game, so how you choose to do things, which my first playthrough, I'm trying to do it all one way, and the next playthrough, I'll do it all the other, to see what the different outcomes are, or really how much it changes the story. So I can't talk to how much it actually changes the story, but I do know it changes it some, and I'll see what the outcome is. But it is cool that you can make some decisions, you can change some outcomes, you can also affect some support characters in the game, and also some NPCs. So it is cool that you get to change and do some of those things in the game. It's not just one playthrough and you're done. You can do several if you wish. The performance for itself for the game actually runs really, really well on Xbox. I can't talk to anything else but I can talk about the scores, which we will get into toward the end. But yeah, on performance-wise, it runs really, really well. There's maybe a few little hiccups when there's a lot of area of effect going on in the world, and there's a lot of stuff happening, and the game's trying to render it all. There can maybe be a little bit of hiccups, but they're really unnoticeable, and I don't think most people will notice them really at all. And you do have different modes where you can have a quality if you want to boost that up to 4K, or or ray tracing. I can't remember exactly. Or you can put it on performance, and I like that higher frame rate for combat. And for some of the enemies, it is really nice to have that higher frame rate, double the frames basically, and it is pretty consistent at that 60 frames. So yeah, they do a really good job of making sure the performance is high end for the game, for boss fights, for the environment, for anything that's really going on. And two, the game looks visually beautiful. Like they really put a lot of work into it. It is made in Unreal Engine 5, but it is like a really well made and good game for Unreal Engine 5, at least with what I can see on my Xbox. And yeah, they did a wonderful job. The end game is very, very difficult. There's multiple difficulty spikes throughout the game, so you'll kind of get used to it. And then when you get to like Chapter 5, it's like, woo, okay, like that is extremely challenging and frustrating. So yeah, you got to work on leveling up and stuff, or maybe even try some different gear or weapons. And yeah, but those difficulty spikes are definitely there. Some of the bosses are really easy in the game, and other bosses are extremely difficult. And it's not like the easy ones are at the beginning and the hard ones are at the end. Generally speaking, that is the case. But there are some also really tough mini bosses kind of halfway through a chapter that really are difficult. And I really think part of the reason for that is that some of these mini bosses, you fight them by yourself, so you don't have your NPC helper buddy to be able to help you out that you can call in for an actual boss fight. But some of the other boss fights are actually quite easy. You know, beat them on my first try and was able to move on, and it wasn't a big deal. But yeah, some of the mini bosses I actually kind of struggled with and had to try multiple times. And you know, generally they were faster. They had, you know, kind of wider sweepings of attacks, or very, very quick on their attacks in succession, and they were quite challenging. But yeah, those difficulty spikes are important to mind because it doesn't feel like it kind of feels like the game is broken up into 3 different pieces made up out of 11 chapters. And those difficulty spikes happen kind of at the start of like the next set of chapters that you're going to be going through. And but yeah, those spikes can be pretty brutal. And of course, too, as you get toward the end of the game, more or less, like you do have some new enemy types or some differences of environment, but like the game is starting to be designed in a way where it's kind of cheaply difficult on purpose, like more beams to walk on or tighter spaces to traverse through with enemies to deal with. And while there are some new enemies, there's a lot of repeated ones as well, but they're also hidden more. There's more ambush points. There's more of them. And even to the point of entrapment, which let me tell you is pretty frustrating because the camera isn't very kind when you're really stuck and you're close to an object or a wall or even an enemy. It's actually really hard to see. And that's one thing I'm struggling with right now in my last boss fight. So yeah, there are some, I would say, some kind of issues there. Like the difficulty isn't necessarily a good difficulty. It's more of a frustration, especially in chapter, I would say probably chapter 9 and chapter 11, the very end of the game. That is the longest freaking road to try to get through chapter 11. There's multiple fights in there, and that is, it's just insanely difficult and frustrating. And yeah, there's a lot of that just, oh, I got to do it again. But overall, it is a really well done game. So far, I've basically completed it once. Again, I have that one more boss fight. I have 48 hours into the game. Again, on my first playthrough. Though I will say most of it is actual gameplay, of course, but there are some hours in there where I got to be a dad, I need to be a husband, or something else is coming up and I need to be able to deal with that. So yeah, my game runs in the background for a bit or for a while, depending on what's going on. So that's not That's not a true representation of how many hours of gameplay there is. I would probably say it's roughly like probably 20 to 30 hours is probably what you're going to do, depending on what your playstyle is and how good you are at Dark Souls games. I would say, too, I want to bring this up for those of you that really struggled with the first boss before the first big patch. They've actually changed some of the movement. They've tweaked some of the engagement in boss fights, and it does make it easier, because I really struggled with that first boss fight as well. When we take a look at those that have actually gotten past the first boss, it's only 40% of us. So the other 60% never made it past the first boss. and yeah, that's pretty brutal. And yeah, at launch, the first boss was incredibly hard. And then after that patch, and I did cover that in my news a while back, probably last year sometime. But yeah, when they did put out their patch, that definitely did make the boss fights easier, made it easier to kind of move around and to sidestep and dodge and stuff, and that completely changed the fight. So I was able to come back this month and beat the first boss, and I've been working on playing Lies of P ever since, because yeah, it's been just such a wonderful game to enjoy. But yeah, the game released in September of 2023. So yeah, if you got stuck somewhere, man, try it again. If you played it at launch, I would try it again. There are physical copies out there for PlayStation and for Xbox. Currently, the Xbox store has the game at a 4.0 out of 5. This is 4,800 reviews, which is really big for a game on the Xbox store. Usually, if there's a bunch of reviews for a game, it's in the hundreds or maybe even 1,000. But yeah, there are almost 5,000 reviews for this game, and I'm going to add my own as well. If we take a look at SteamDB, we're looking at a 90.5%. There's still over 1,000 players on it right now that are playing it, and 90.5% score is with 48,000 reviews. So again, a lot of people on Steam actually enjoyed it. There's also going to be a DLC that's going to be coming. The game was successful enough and has enough players, and they're going to be making a DLC called Overture, which I don't think was expected. I think the game was just supposed to be standalone on its own, and I'm assuming, with how much I know, that the ending is also going to be capped off pretty well. So I'm kind of curious what they're actually going to be doing with Overture, and yeah, we'll have to see what that looks like, but I'll work on reviewing that here. There are some issues in the game. Again, let's talk about the difficulty spikes. Those can be pretty frustrating. And while there are a kind of array of different enemy types and stuff, it really kind of starts to slow and stagger in those enemy types until you get to Chapter 11. Then there's definitely a spike up from that. But yeah, definitely from kind of like Chapter 6 or Chapter 7 to 10, there's a lot of repeated enemies there, and also a lot of combat animations that those enemies have. So if you've learned, from one enemy, you probably know the movesets for the others that you're also going to encounter. So it would have been nice if there was a little bit more variety instead of just reskinning some enemies. It would have been nice if there was a little bit more variety, but I know this is kind of a smaller studio. The other thing, too, is that there's some audio lines actually missing in the game. So I noticed with 2 characters, there's one of the bosses that has some missing lines in their cutscene where their mouth isn't moving, they're just standing there. I have subtitles on, so I can see the subtitles on the screen, but if I didn't have subtitles on, I wouldn't know that they would actually be talking. And I usually play with subtitles so I can actually read it. That's just easier for me. Yeah, I see the subtitles and it's like, I'm not actually hearing any audio. That's kind of weird. And it's not like it's a glitch that kind of comes and goes. It's every single time that boss for that section of line isn't talking, isn't present. So that's a mistake there on their part. Also, too, there's someone else in the hub world, if you will, that also during a certain line, again, it shows up as a subtitle, but they don't actually say it. So again, that's kind of an issue. So they skipped that or missed that a couple of times. For anyone else, I didn't notice it on anyone else. Again, I've basically gone through all of the side quests. I've done all of the rooms and gotten a lot of the keys and kind of gone back and explored different areas to try to literally get as much of the game done as I can so that I can talk to you guys. But yeah, that is kind of a bummer that a couple of audio lines are missing. Let's see, what else? There's no microtransactions. At least as far as I can see, there's no story. You earn everything in game. So yeah, it's actually worth to explore. It's actually worth to engage and kind of poke around and try stuff. There are playthroughs out there, of course, too, or walkthroughs that you can look at if you are stuck. I did get stuck in a few areas. There are some game design levels that can you can get turned around pretty easily, or you think you're heading in a correct direction, but you actually backtracked. So, but yeah, overall, I got to give this probably an 8.5 to a 9.0, somewhere in there. Again, I haven't completely finished the entire game, but I'm on that last boss fight. And I just think they've done a wonderful job for kind of making a Dark Souls-like game. They've done a great job of taking a story, molding it into a Dark Souls world. They've done a great job with Unreal Engine 5 and the mechanics in the game and the combat differences and the styles, and even just being able to switch your blade versus your handle for different weapons, for different effects, or combining different things with different weapons. That's really cool. There definitely is, though, those difficulty spikes, and there's a couple of audio lines missing, though that really doesn't, break the experience. And then some of the bosses, oh my word, they are quite difficult, while others are just absolutely a walk in the park. So yeah, that's kind of frustrating too in a way, and that's kind of how I felt with like Lords of the Fallen. Is that there were maybe a few bosses that were actually really difficult, but again, the majority of the bosses were relatively easy. And there were a few that were frustrating, but like I never had to rebuy any star fragments to like call in my NPC or anything, and I still have a ton for the last boss fight. I'm working on doing that now. And then yeah, if you're not interested in the lore, if you're not interested in the side quest, that will save you a few hours of trying to go back and go through stuff. I think there is maybe one more thing to actually try to find. But yeah, there are some secrets in there too, which is cool in the game. Some things that I didn't expect. And you literally walk right by them. So that's kind of hilarious. So yeah, overall, if you enjoy Dark Souls or want kind of something of a challenge, this would be a wonderful game to actually pick up. And yeah, there are some physical copies out there that you can find on PlayStation and on Xbox. And yeah, this game was on Game Pass for a while. That's how I got started. And then yeah, when it just came off of Xbox, so I went and bought a physical copy. But yeah, Overture we're going to cover here, and man, I hope they do some more. Neil Witz is wonderful. They've done a great job with their game. So thanks for tuning in, folks. You can always find me at Gaming Garbage 22 over at YouTube. You can also follow me over at Twitch if you'd like as well. And yeah, for reviews like this or for gaming news or for deep dives, I don't really look at my chat because I don't want to interrupt my train of thought because I'm going to be posting it all on YouTube. But like when I'm playing a game or like Tomb Raider or Halo or whatever, I enjoy having people in the chat and I'll respond to those. But otherwise, yeah, I won't. And whichever you prefer, you can get it all here first on Twitch if you'd like, or you can just wait for it to be a little bit nicer, some gameplay stuff for on YouTube and thumbnails and whatever. There's a little bit of work done, of course, over there, and that's where my main focus is. But either way, if you enjoy the content, go ahead and like, sub, all that jazz, and also share the content. And with that, folks, we'll see you guys on the next one.